It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Joining us today, not from the Pensacola Airport, Noah Strackbein, All Steelers, host of All Steelers Talk. Noah, what's going on, pal?
Nothing. I'm alive and well. I was trying to find the Pensacola, Florida shirt. I hope they're doing well down there. I hope the Chick-fil-A has since been certified and verified as a real Chick-fil-A since our time down in Pensacola. But I'm excited to be here.
If people are not familiar with the Pensacola Airport, there's like 8 gates there in total. 2 of them are like only for private jets. Like, it is the smallest airport that I've ever been in, and it's literally a bar and Chick-fil-A to choose from, and an Einstein's Bagels to choose from.
Yes,
food wise. Noah and I knocked them all out in one trip where we got to lay there for an entire day. A little bit of an inside joke that I wanted to kick off the show with. If you saw my Twitter post about Noah being on the show, I used a picture of him sleeping at the airport. So there's that. Alan, how are we doing?
I'm doing at least as well as I was sitting there in Mobile watching you guys struggle through that airport debacle, knowing that I was driving home to Pittsburgh in the comfortable driver's seat of my own car and did not have to worry about any of that. I'm doing at least that well.
Yeah, it didn't stop there for Noah either. I remember we got back to Pittsburgh, like his truck, he couldn't open the door because of we got a really bad storm in Pittsburgh while this was all going on. Couldn't open the door to his truck. So he had to Uber home and then come back. It was even worse for Noah than it was for me. So that was
as we drove home, as my Uber driver drove me home, my phone died. And as we pass accident after accident, I go, this is it, man. This is how I'm going out. The backseat of the Uber drive after the worst trip of my life. My wife's not going to have any idea. And here we are. But we made it. Truck's still going, and I hope Pensacola is still around.
No, we have a topic that I'm very excited to talk about, something that is kind of an extension of what we touched on not too long ago, Alan and I, about the offense maybe being archaic was the word that was used prior. That was last week, actually, when Derek and Nick were on here. But first, I got to ask you, I forgot to ask our last guest, what did you think of the intro music, the voiceover that we got? Isn't it fantastic?
I was actually thinking it as it was playing. I was like, this is nice. This is especially the intro welcoming both of you. I was a big fan of the intro music. I didn't catch it. To be honest, I watched the podcast, but I don't watch the intros. Or I'm like the guy that it zones out in the background and then something interesting gets said. I'm like, but no, it was good. Yeah. It was nice.
We appreciate it. That's the calling card of the podcast. Whatever happens after that, that's on us, but we know that's going to be great. Episode in and episode out. So excited about that. Alan, you remember that conversation we had last week where an article was put out calling Arthur Smith's offense archaic. Well, you know what, baby? Let's double down on it this time of the offseason because Fantasy Points, that's a thing, wrote an article talking about Arthur Smith's offense, and they categorized it as a sloth-paced World War II like offense.
Yeah, I gotta say, we piled on Cody Benjamin at CBS Sports last week, and Scott Barrett of FantasyPoints.com, which is an outlet that I admittedly had never heard of before. We'll give Scott credit for this. He's a better writer. I like his description a lot better. I mean, like, you got my attention at sloth-paced World War II era. But it's wrong. Yeah. And it's wrong for a lot of the reasons that we talked about before. And I know I don't want to rehash all the same arguments, but I do think it's really appropriate to point out that this is a fantasy sports outlet writing this. And I think a lot of the conversation that has been negative about Arthur Smith comes from him being an offensive coordinator that is extremely frustrating if you have one of his players in fantasy football. He is a guy that does not always pile all of the statistics on his star players. He spreads the ball around. He has, plays 2 running backs. He throws the ball. Alex Kozora at Steelers Depot today wrote an article about how he has more than doubled the number of touchdown receivers than the Steelers have had over the last 4 or 5 years. That's part of what he's going to do. He's going to spread the ball around. He's going to find ways to use. He's thrown touchdown passes to tackles. When we look at this offense, we've talked about the ways we see, what's he going to do with Connor Hayward? What's he going to do with Calvin Austin? How's he going to make Darnell Washington a better red zone threat? Yeah, we think all those things. Those guys are irrelevant people from fantasy football. Every touchdown that Calvin Austin and Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward get is one that's coming away from Najee Harris and George Pickens. And I think from a certain perspective, people like the dear Mr. Barrett, they have pushed this narrative that he is not good just because of fantasy football.
No, what's your take on that? Because I think that Alan hit a lot of points there. You've gotten to see this offense up close and personal, obviously not to the degree that we're going to get to see once we get into training camp and really get rolling in the preseason and regular season and stuff. But is that where this conversation really is coming from? Is fantasy football driving a narrative about this offense that really isn't there?
Yeah, I think 100%. And it goes to the big names. Like, that's the problem, is everybody wanted to bag on Arthur Smith's coaching last year because what's his name? Bijan Robinson, was not getting the touches or the touchdowns that many expected him to, or Drake London or Kyle Pitts fall off after the Atlanta Falcons rookie receiving record or touchdowns record the year before. Like, everybody was, he's not good with the stars. Well, he's good with everybody else. And that's the point Alan just made. And that's where the Steelers win. Like, if you're somebody who's talking about the narrative of Arthur Smith's offense, you're probably also talking about the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers have 11 wide receiver 4s and no wide receiver 2, and nobody on the coaching staff is worried about it because Arthur Smith's offense isn't created so that just the superstars are thriving. It's going to pull guys back. You're going to have to find the vulture. The Najee Harris is probably going to have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, or Jaylen Warren's going to have the 10 touchdowns. And you just got to get lucky there in a fantasy football aspect of it. But that's where that narrative's coming from. And it doesn't worry the Steelers, because if Scotty Miller has 2 touchdowns and Van Jefferson has 2 touchdowns and Roman Wilson has 2 touchdowns and Calvin Austin has 2 touchdowns, the Pittsburgh Steelers passing game is pretty good. And it's going to be the same thing with the running game or with Connor Hayward and all these tight ends. That's a non-issue. It's an issue for a fantasy football standpoint. If you're trying to win football games, nobody cares as long as touchdowns are being scored.
No, what a great number for you to throw out for Scotty Miller. He had 2 receiving touchdowns last year, equaling the number that Drake London had. So that is to go along with what people are saying here. Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith, both with 3. Tyler Algier had 5 touchdowns last year. So people that own Bijan Robinson, obviously a little bit frustrated by that. There's a ton of guys that had 1 or 2 touchdowns. So yeah, the ball gets spread around a lot more, but from a real life perspective, we don't care who's scoring the touchdowns in an offense. Only the fantasy
for a guy who's in an extraordinarily deep fantasy football league, I did great with Tyler Algier and Jonnu Smith last year. Y'all are playing in the wrong. This 8-person stuff. That's not. You need like 12-man with like 25 player rosters, and then like Jonnu Smith was like a god tier waiver claim. Like, that was awesome. Like, yeah, you're just playing the wrong fantasy football.
I do remember a lot of stories about your wild fantasy. If anybody needs fantasy football advice, talk to Alan, because he's in probably the worst and most stressful fantasy football league of all time. But I was on the other side of that. I had Bijan Robinson sitting there every week going, I can't bench him. He's going to lose me the game, but I can't bench him. So I was a frustrated guy. Now I just know George Pickens is sitting there in the 3rd round. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm going to wait it out, and we're going to see what happens.
How long did we talk about, and was there a narrative about like, you don't want to have one of Bill Belichick's running backs in fantasy football, but somehow it got separate. Like, but nobody was like, Bill Belichick, it just did. It somehow that got separated there, and it didn't with Arthur Smith. Obviously, I guess Super Bowls is a part of it, but like,
sure. I guess my question also goes to, is it 1-to-1 personnel wise? Like, is it fair to say that the Steelers have the personnel to just also equally be able to spread the ball around this way? Because like talking about the situation with Pat Freiermuth, I figured it out. I went through the numbers every year that Arthur Smith has run an offense, whether it was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee or the running the show in Atlanta. Tight ends have gotten an average of 131 targets per season. But does Pittsburgh have a secondary pass catching option in the tight end room like Jonnu Smith was behind Kyle Pitts in Atlanta?
I don't think so.
Maybe in aggregate, maybe if you do the same thing you're talking about, like Scotty Miller's 2 touchdowns and Van Jefferson's 2 touchdowns, like I think they have very similarly to wide receiver position. I think Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward and Michael Pruitt, and even Rodney Williams are all like guys you can throw the ball to in an NFL game and not feel bad about doing so. But I don't think any one of them is going to add up to like a significant amount of targets.
No, I agree. I don't look at them as having a true tight end too. It's more just it's the same thing as wide receiver. Like you said, it's a bunch of guys who specialize in different things and can be utilized in different ways, and they can make it work. And I think they will make it work, even if they don't have a Jonnu Smith.
I think too, I was going back and looking, and I'll just use last year's Atlanta team as an example because I have them pulled up right now. But even when I was going back and looking, it always seemed to me that there was like a big 3 or 4, which you could probably say around the league a lot. But, people talking about spreading the ball around, that's really from like the touchdown perspective. From a target perspective, like Drake London, 110, Kyle Pitts, 90, Bijan Robinson, 86, Jonnu Smith, 70. And then there's a drop off to Matt Collins, who had the 5th most targets at 30. So like, where will we see that drop off if we do within Pittsburgh? Like, where does that spot lie? Or is it going to be more balanced?
Pickens, Freiermuth, Jalen Warren, to me, are like the 3 guys. Like, if you're talking about like the players who I think Arthur Smith's presence will benefit from a fantasy football perspective, I'd say those 3 guys, and then Najee Harris, just because of the additional running volume, I think also, but probably not as much in the passing game. But like, those are the 4 players that I think you should feel good about from a fantasy football perspective because Arthur Smith is here. And I'm not worried about, like you said, maybe they won't get the touchdowns, but like not like Pickens and Jalen Warren had a ton of touchdowns anyway. They're mostly yardage guys. Like, I think like you should feel pretty okay about their production at least being as good, if not better, with Arthur Smith as the OC.
Yeah, and I think at fantasy football wise, just exclusively fantasy football, you could find a guy that you feel comfortable late in. I think Darnell Washington's a guy that Arthur Smith's offense could utilize much more than Matt Canada's did, especially in the red zone. That's something that you could look forward to. Just like you said, Najee Harris will be a big one. And I think you could find sleepers. You could find a Calvin Austin and take a winger on him and say, okay, this is real late in the draft. Nobody's even thinking about this guy because he didn't do much last year. Maybe he turns into something. I think there's those possibilities where an Arthur Smith offense actually benefits some guys that we just don't know yet, that are just question marks. You can't say this is a definitive positive, but there are a couple of those. And I think you could toss a guy like Van Jefferson in there too and just say, bottom of your depth chart, you need him on a fly because all your guys are on a bye week. Toss him in there. You never know. I think that there's a couple of those guys where you could just get some value for.
Certainly familiarity there. They traded for him last year, did Van Jefferson with the Atlanta Falcons, got 28 targets in Atlanta. So we'll see. Maybe he does have a bigger role than what we're looking like on the surface as of right now. Alan, we got a couple questions from YouTube that we always like to get to, and I'm always interested when we have a third person on here to bring in their perspective on these things as well. Christopher Hawkenberry, one of the great names that we've ever had asked us a question, by the way. Thanks, Chris. We appreciate it. Said Nick Herbig shows potential to give Watt some more breaks. Need to also sign Highsmith for a few more seasons on the other end. Does Nick Herbig's presence potentially give them the ability to take some pressure off of Watt in the next few years to maybe extend Watt's career? This comes off the heels of us having a conversation about when does Bleacher Report put out the article, could TJ Watt retire earlier than we think? The reason being, is he going to be a guy that hangs on until he can? Will he be a guy that doesn't want to see himself deteriorate his play at all? But we had that conversation. This was asked to us. Could Herbig's presence on the roster, could he get to a level where maybe he is the type of guy that can extend TJ's career?
I do think he can be. I'm not sure if we're going to see that this year, but I think if he continues to grow the way that we saw him grow in his rookie season, by about year 3, I think you're kind of doing him a disservice and the whole team a disservice if you're not finding more ways to get him onto the field. So yeah, I think he is absolutely a guy that, and when we talked about this, when we talked about Cam Hayward and how they don't have anyone to take any of the pressure off of him. It's one of the big problems. One of the reasons why I don't see them moving on from Cam Hayward is that they need him. There's nobody else. And so I do think having someone behind TJ Watt could extend his career, make him and just make it so that he doesn't have to play 80% of the snaps or 85% of the snaps, where he can get some time down and And if Nick Herbig can continue to be a really productive pass rusher and maybe add some we didn't really see him a lot in sort of obvious running situations last year. I'd like to see some more of that too. But yeah, if he can continue to be a good player, why not?
No, what are your thoughts about Nick Herbig? We've only obviously seen one season. One thing that I appreciate about the way that they went about this offseason, though, was they didn't block him by bringing in like another veteran pass rusher. Obviously, it was great to have Marcus Golden in that edge 3 role last year, but they're kind of letting Nick Herbig now figure it out, become that edge 3, step into that role. So what are your thoughts about Nick Herbig and his ascension?
Yeah, I think the pass rush is definitely there, but you bring up a good point, Alan, about the run stuffing and being able to be a run edge rusher. That's what Herbig kind of has to develop with, and if he could do that, that's where you're going to see the most. I guess the Steelers be able to maximize his usage to slow down the wear and tear on TJ Watt and to get him off the field as much as they can, because you could take him off on third down, but you're not gonna take TJ Watt off the field when you need TJ Watt on the field. Where you could take TJ Watt off the field is second down, is first down, a couple of drives to make sure that you could slow things down. And that's where Herbig has to develop. But I think that the potential is there. I also think that with Herbig being in his rookie contract, being cheap, being a contract you don't have to worry about for a couple of years, if he becomes that solidified outside linebacker 3, this is a dude that's out there all the time playing, I don't want to say equally, but as much as he possibly can. It allows the Steelers to go out there and find somebody else who is specialized in the run and could fit that other role. And then you have a group of 4 that you could actually utilize, which they had last year, but to a real small extent because Herbig was a rookie and had to develop. If you could get that, that'll maximize the least amount of wear and tear on TJ Watt and how much you could prolong his career. I think it's there. I also think TJ probably kill you if you were like, hey, you're only going to play 65% of the snaps in this game. He'd be like, I don't think that's going to happen. He goes 115 miles an hour every time he's on the field, and he hates not being on the field. So I don't know what you guys talked about with this, the article the other day about him retiring early. I don't talk to TJ Watt outside of interviews and the casual, how's it going, TJ? And I could tell you from every instance that man is not thinking about retiring from football.
Yeah, it was a Bleacher Report article that was put out about like 7 players that could retire sooner than we think. And TJ was one of the 7 players mentioned. I mean, to your point, I don't think that we're staring down the barrel of that right now.
No, how many Super Bowls does TJ win between now and that article? Correct, because it's got to be more than one.
We kind of spun that conversation into more so how many years do we have of this version of TJ Watt?
Yeah, that was true.
Just because that's kind of, TJ Watt is the Steelers defense. Obviously, there's some great players still on that defense, but we see the numbers with and without TJ Watt. They're not running from anybody. They can't hide. So, I think we kind of turned it into that conversation. But I agree with you. I don't think that it's something that is imminent by any means, like a season or 2 away, and all of a sudden TJ's gonna surprise, I'm retiring.
Yeah,
I do think that personality though that he has, like, it sort of lends itself to be like, he's also going to be very frustrated by not being able to play at a level that he thinks he's capable of. So like, he doesn't strike me as a guy like we mentioned, like Julius Peppers, who like was great and then played like 8 more years as just like a guy who hung around. I don't really know that I see that in TJ either. Like, when he stops being able to play at the level that he thinks he should, I think he probably will hang it up. Now, I think he's got a lot, 5 years easy probably of that. But like, I do think there, because of that personality, like it sort of comes with that. It comes with the territory. Like, he doesn't want to come off the field. He's also not going to accept not great play from himself.
Yeah, I agree. 35 years old though. And like,
yeah,
that's not for an edge rusher who has done the things and also had some injuries that TJ's had. Like, that's old. That's not. That's not.
I mean, and like we're saying,
yeah,
the way that he plays, he's emptying the tank.
Exactly.
So
there's and I don't see. TJ is also the guy that, you look at TJ and it shocks you that he's 30 years old. Like, there's really, I thought you were 27. Like, there's no way. So I agree with you, but 5 years, I would agree with that number too.
Keith says, here is a question for Alan. Well, I guess in this case as well, Smitty and Noah. What determines the
Get
pay
lost,
for
you guys. It's only a question for me. Get out of here.
Yeah, actually, as I asked, I'll just remove myself from the screen. Here's a question for Alan, Smitty, and Noah. What determines the pay for coaches? Is it set by the league, or do teams have full control? And does that payroll, or does that go against the cap in any way?
Yeah, so teams, there's no salary cap or roster limit on coaches. Teams could have 150 coaches all being paid $150 million a year, and that would be perfectly legal within the NFL rules. The Steelers are generally one of the thriftier ones. I know Mike Tomlin is very highly compensated when it comes to other NFL head coaches, and I believe on this new extension will be even more so. But in terms of both their pay and the number of other assistant coaches, Steelers are probably not near the top of the charts. It's sort of been an interesting talking point over the years. I've tried to kind of pin Mike Tomlin down about why that is, and I've never really been able to. It's interesting. He's made comments about, like wanting to have a smaller staff because you feel like you just have better control of the message. You don't have, conflicting voices or guys with different ideas when you have a smaller coaching staff. But it's been pretty stark, the difference in coaching staff size between them and some of their competition. I feel like it got a little bit better this offseason with some of the additions they made to the offensive staff. They now have, 3 guys working with the offensive line. They have 2 quarterbacks coaches. They have Mike Sullivan in that. I'm still not quite sure what it is role that he has on that offensive staff, but he's still around. And so I think they probably on offense have come around a little bit, but it's still one of the smaller staffs in the league. It's probably still, when you take away Mike Tomlin's salary, one of the less expensive coaching staffs in the league. And I don't really know that that's all bad or all good. It's probably a little bit of both.
Well, I think that's first off, regarding Mike Sullivan, Alan, you said mainly, I don't know if that's changed, but you said early on you saw him mainly working with receivers. Was that still kind of been the case?
Yeah, mostly, but that just could be somewhere to put him. Like it does, I don't know. We'll see. I think the big reason to keep Mike Sullivan was that they probably want to keep some of the concepts that they ran last year. And so having someone to help Arthur Smith integrate those into the new offense was going to be useful. He's also under contract anyway. So, like, if you're paying the guy, you may as well have him do something, even if it's just catching the balls the wide receivers are throwing back. Like,
maybe he's
something out of it.
Maybe he's handling the fireworks at our 4th of July cookout, which a little bit of a tease for tomorrow's episode. Be sure to check that out as well. Really fun episode. But I appreciate this question because of what it could spin into, like Alan was going with there. Like, not so much, obviously, the determining the pay for coaches is a completely separate thing, but spinning that into looking at the size of the coaching staff, because I feel like we've talked about that for years. And Noah, I'd like to get your perspective on that as well. Like, a lot of people have kind of come around within the last few years to this being a major talking point within the fan base, even, is do the Steelers have this very cheap, very small staff?
So my biggest question, real fast, are there fireworks on the show tomorrow? Was that what was happening? Because my brain
fireworks are part of the 4th of July party superlative thing that we threw. However, I did not actually light any fireworks in my basement.
Then that's just not worth it. Nobody.
Although
I could, don't get your expectations. I will say there are no live fireworks.
We've thrown out the idea of me doing an episode at some point, literally in my pool. Now, if that takes place, maybe I set off fireworks behind me while I'm in the pool and just pull it all together.
I'm not going to say anything because I want to support the idea, but I also like you as a friend and I don't want anything to happen. And I just picture bad things happening on this podcast. And then you still have to put it out. Like, that's the worst part, is like, like, hey, Alan had to put the episode together and publish it because, Smitty's lost his legs.
Because I lost three fingers. And,
the pool blew up from fireworks and I was supportive of it. So I as your friend, I'm going to say no, but that's a great idea. Okay. When it comes to the small coaching staffs and where the Steelers stand, like, I get the message of Mike Tomlin saying that a small staff allows you to keep that message close and to have more hands that are significant in the pile at a time instead of too many hands pulling each and every way. And I'd have to do a deeper dive into some of the coaching staffs of Bill Belichick back in the day and stuff like that, because I feel like there might be some resemblance there. At the same time, I think it plays a role into why the Steelers constantly rotate coaches, which I don't necessarily think is always a good thing. I mean, you could almost time out when guys are going to come and go when it comes to position coaches. You just start to get a sense, okay, the contract's up. This guy's probably going to stay, but this guy's not going to stay. And you start to see that cycle pretty consistently. I don't think that's the best way to go about things. And I think you've seen the success of it when it doesn't happen, when Carl Dunbar's here, as long as Carl Dunbar's been here, or, now it'll be, I think Pat Meyer might be the next one, but Mike Munchak was the best example that you could give there. When guys stick around longer, you get that success, you get that continuity, you start to develop guys more. The Steelers don't have that recently, and I think that's a big flaw in the Mike Tomlin system right now, and the Steelers system as a whole, is that their guys aren't here long enough to make a larger impact than they've made, and you should make a larger impact. I think it'll play a role. Like you don't have that guy, you don't have that coach on the coaching staff in Pittsburgh right now, where if somebody was doing some segment on him or some deep dive into this coach because he's a historic coach and he's been in the league and in Pittsburgh for so long and has made this impact, there's nobody here. And I think that hurts them when it comes to what they're trying to do and the success that they've had, or lack thereof that they've had.
Yeah, you mentioned the Patriots under Belichick. They had actually a smaller coaching staff than the Steelers, but now this offseason, with Gerard Mayo as the head coach, they've gone like totally 180. They're like one of the bigger ones. It's not a big difference. Like the difference between the biggest coaching staff and the smallest coaching staff is like 5 coaches or something like that. Like it's not a huge difference. I think that there's some nuance here. Like I think where you see it come out is in the development of coaches. And like sometimes you lose a coach that you don't want to lose. And that is a fact of life in the NFL. Like when the Steelers lost Mike Munchak, they didn't want to lose Mike Munchak, and they did not successfully replace him. And it doesn't happen to the Steelers a ton, but there are other examples over the years where, like, hey, very unfortunately, Darryl Drake passed away at the beginning of the 2019 season. They had to go hire, another wide receiver coach off the street that is not working with the team in training camp to get through the season. Like, there are times when you're going to lose a coach that you don't want to coach. And I feel like they don't have a big enough bench, a coaching bench, to have somebody you feel good about promoting for a lot of these roles. Like, I don't think, like, Terrell Austin was very briefly mentioned as like a college head coaching candidate this past offseason. If Terrell Austin gets plucked, like, do you feel good about being like, oh, the Steelers have another defensive coordinator ready to go? Like, if Grady Brown gets plucked to go be, some college DC, do you have another, like, I think that's where it's really hurt them, in that when you have a bigger staff, you give yourself a couple more shots at finding that next guy that you really like, that you can promote and move up through your own system.
You mentioned Grady Brown. It's funny because I was literally going to bring that up because they lost Gerald Alexander to the Raiders this offseason. Was his spot replaced? Because I don't even know if they brought in a assistant DB.
Anthony Midget is the name of the
that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Who's
DB's coach?
Might be overqualified for what he's doing in Pittsburgh, but which makes him a bad example of like having a bench, because Alexander was a great bench.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. To Noah's point about, because we always talk about continuity being built with the players, like, the offensive line, a big thing is going to be able to watch them develop this year all together because there's so many moving pieces. But a lot of times that conversation gets lost with being under the same coach at the position as well. So I don't know. Interesting conversation. We appreciate the questions. Do you guys have anything else?
No, usually we give our guests that come on some time to talk about what they're doing.
But we're not going to this episode.
Competing with us. So, like, I don't know how much I want to do. But I just, I think we had Steven on the other day, obviously, and What's
Stephen Thompson on here?
Yeah.
Before me?
Yeah, well, you might have been in Italy, so you were unavailable.
I think I'm a little butthurt on that one.
But it's funny because people in the comments, actually, we should clarify now, because people in the comments actually thought he was leaving you to come to us.
Oh, and I got a million. At the same time, I had about 60 text message / DMs of people saying, "Is Nick Herbig coming to you guys?" And I said, "What do you think we are? We're just me and Alan are just sitting there trading Pokemon cards at practice."
Yeah, Nick Herbig for Stephen Thompson. The trade is 1-for-1.
There's too much hair. Me and Nick, there'd be too much hair. Can't. That would be the problem.
Can't happen.
No,
can't happen.
No, you can only have one man bun in a group, and
yeah,
would be the
that is the maximum. That is the maximum.
Anyways,
no, but
Noah, yeah.
What's you just got married. You were a young guy when we first met. When you came out of college, you got kind of dumped right into covering the Steelers for a sort of new outlet. What's the journey been like for you, and how different is the 2024 world for Noah Strackbein than 2019 was?
Yeah, it is. It's wildly different. It's so hard to explain how different it is, and you guys are people who have kind of been there through the whole thing, so you probably have seen some of it. Just like Noah's not this newbie anymore. But when I started, I was 23 years old. I was just fresh out of college, had no idea what I was doing. I still remember the first day I was there. I was trying to do a live stream, and I had it set up, and Mike pursued a seat. He came in the middle of the live stream, told me get up and move. Never met this man before in my life. So I was like, all right, sounds good. So I got up on the live stream, walked through the Steelers facility, walked outside into the parking lot, the players' parking lot, and I sat down and I started doing that. And then somebody came out and started yelling at me to stop doing that where I was doing it. And I freaked out, shut my laptop, and just went home. I was like, all right, I don't think I know what I'm doing. I don't think I could do that. Where we've come today is wild. Last year was the first year I kind of felt like a veteran. Now I feel like, I'm there, part of the group, which is good and fun. And appreciate. I mean, Alan, you've been here forever, so like the mix when you walk in as a 23-year-old. All right, when you walk in as a 23-year-old, you look at a group of just like, it's like everybody who's been there for 10 years, and you're like, this is terrifying. Thanks. So now I feel meshed and it feels good. So it's been a crazy journey, but it's been, I like that it happened the way that it did, because at 28, I feel like I'm ready to look Kaboli in the face and tell him, hey, you're wrong. And that takes some guts sometimes.
I always feel like I was the guy where it's like, yeah, okay, he's been here, but he's not like been here a terrifying amount of time where like I can't speak to him. Like the new people, I was like, all right, yeah, like this guy's he knows the answer to my question, and I'm not afraid to ask him. Like that was where I was.
You're the buffer, Alan. You're the buffer for the new people and the people that are the lifers.
I have two great stories for that. The first person I met at the Pittsburgh Steelers facility, I showed up for a Mike Tomlin press conference because I was thrown in the fire. This was not you're showing up before training camp. It was week 2. Ben literally elbow just went out, and I showed up that next Tuesday. And Jerry Dulac is the first person I met walking in, and I'm like, oh man, dude, this is Jerry Dulac. This is crazy. And we're walking up. He's talking to me the whole time. We sit down. I go on Twitter. Jerry Dulac followed me instantly. The ironic part there, the funny part there is about 20 minutes before he followed me, I was blocked by Jerry Dulac on Twitter. That was the first interaction I had. The next day at practice, I'm sitting there talking to Jim Wexel, who's super nice. And he was super nice in the moment, but I'm here for you. Whatever you want. He gives me his phone number, and he's like, I'll give you all the advice I could give you, but I won't help you beat me. And I was like, wow, that was so scary. Thank you. Appreciate it. And that was it. So yeah, there's some people here, man, who are, you're just like, I'm not, keep 2 steps back. I'm still young and I'm not ready for this yet. That was my first experience of those guys.
This might be one of those things you just said might be the answer to this. What's your favorite moment in covering the Steelers so far?
Ooh, I got a couple of them. TJ Watt yelling at Joe Rudder was hilarious. Kenny Pickett yelling at Chris Adamski was hilarious. Anytime somebody gets yelled at, I have a good time. I don't know. Tomlin yelling.
Were you
at
there
me.
for Benny Snell yelling at Nick? Because I wasn't there.
Benny
for that.
Snell
really
yelling at
I
Nick.
was.
Yeah, but that was Benny Snell never really yelled at anybody. Shout out Benny. I hope he's doing really well. He was a super nice guy. He was the guy that like come up to you. Like he had an issue with me one time and he'd like come up to me and then he'd like say what he needed to be said. And then like 2 minutes later, he kind of dap you up and be like, yeah, we're good, man. And I'm like, all right, thank you. Appreciate it. I think Nick did the same thing. Benny was like a good dude, but anybody getting yelled at, it's always like because you're just like, oh, there it is. Is it me? Is it me? George Pickens last year yelling at me like 8 times. This is good times. So those are always fun. Those are always fun. Oh, and anytime Kaboli breaks something, that's also a great time. Anytime Kaboli shows up with a new cast on is always a great time.
Have you gotten any better at traveling since your adventure in the 2020 Senior Bowl
No
airport?
No. If anything, I've gotten worse. I covered a game from I forget what it's called, but some random Super 8 last year because my rental truck couldn't get through the snow. And everybody's texting me like, it's not even snowing in Baltimore. I'm like, there's 8 feet of snow outside my motel room right now. Don't tell me it's not snowing in Maryland. Okay. So no, it's gotten significantly worse. I think it's me. Like we went to Italy for the honeymoon and our flight there got delayed by like 6 hours. That was because I was on the flight. Easy. Our flight home got delayed by like 4 hours. That's because I was there. Easy. And then on our last flight to go back home to Pittsburgh, we're in Atlanta, where we got on the plane, regular scheduled program. The captain gets on the loudspeaker bragging about how we're going to get to Pittsburgh almost 45 minutes early. And I was like, this is awesome. We left the Atlanta airport an hour and a half late because we sat on that airplane. That is because of me. So no, it's me. I'm cursed. I'm
going to send you a Google Drive file if you wouldn't mind. And I just need you to put your schedule in there so I can make sure I got nothing going on where our paths are going to cross.
It's going to be bad.
We need to compare. Are you traveling on the road this year? You haven't done as much. I don't know if you're going to all the road games.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to go to all of them. But if there's flights I don't know if there's enough weekends.
I'm gonna give you 6 flights, not the book. All right, just I've already have tickets on these ones. If you could not get on them, that'd be great.
I think that's a great. If we ever go international, that's my worry about going internationals. I don't think I'd have enough time to make it home. I might miss the next game.
You miss next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's Noah? He's still in Mexico.
He's still in Mexico. He couldn't even make he had to drive back and the highways are shut down because it's Noah. I
was going to say, I think that fear could come to fruition next season.
It could. And I think for the good of the team and for everybody else traveling potentially on the same airport as me, I can't go. I would have to hunker down. Maybe I'd have to send somebody else. Be like, you want to go act like Noah Strackbein for a weekend? Go ahead. Free trip to Mexico.
There it is. A lot of fun. Alan, anything else?
No, I'm good, man.
All right. No, we appreciate you joining us. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me at si.com/NFL/Steelers and then youtube.com/all Steelers talk Monday through Friday. I'm there doing the same thing these guys are doing.
Yeah. Well.
Just not as well. With worse bumper music and voiceover. Like that.
Yeah,
much worse.
You can say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want about once that intro ends and before the outro starts.
Yeah.
But you're not competing. You're not competing with
our first 30 seconds and our last 10 seconds are undefeated.
Yeah, I'm excited for the last 10. Is it the same thing? Are we about to see the same thing?
Without the words. We got the words, but we're going out. Yep.
It's fantastic. I'll be in my head all day. Jillian later tonight will be like, what are you humming? I'll be like, dude, you don't know this banger? What are you talking about? So yeah.
I'll show you something once we wrap up too that you'll appreciate even more. Alan, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Use the promo code Allen10, get $10 off Steelers Now Plus, all the best stuff from me, Derek Bell, and the rest of the gang. And make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell for notifications. 12,800 subscribers. We're getting there. We're getting there. Nowhere near what Noah has, of course, but we're getting there.
Hey,
Allen 10, $10, not 10%, $10 off. That wasn't.
Yeah, we figured out what the problem was. It was missold, I guess, is what we'll say. I'm not taking responsibility for the error still, so whatever.
There we go. If you are on YouTube, like Alan said, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. You'll get a notification when a new pod goes up over there. Follow me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, Noah Strackbein, and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.